All right, so this video came across my YouTube feed because I follow RP and Dr. Mike here. If you don't know who Dr. Mike is and you haven't looked at the Renaissance Periodization app, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. The guy is brilliant. His videos he puts out are brilliant. He's super funny. He's super smart. I don't train like he trains. He personally is a bodybuilder. So by design, his entire method and everything he's trying to do is to grow the muscles on his body so he can look a certain way. That is the point of bodybuilding, and that's what he does. And he's never said anything otherwise. He is, however, super smart, so when it comes to actual performance, he knows exactly what to do with regards to that. So if you haven't checked out Dr. Mike, I highly recommend checking out Dr. Mike. This video that he just posted is called, "Is It Bad to Train Just for Looks?" And the reason that I'm making this video is I personally have a vendetta against training just for looks. And I know most people who train because they want to look a certain way. And it's been my personal bent for a long time that I really don't think it's a great thing to do. But I wanted to hear what he said about it and kind of respond to it in real time. Unfortunately, when I filmed through this the first time, when I watched the whole thing, it was so long that my camera cut out. And so I'm kind of going back through some of the main points. And there's a big chunk in the middle where he just talks about essentially why it'd be a bad idea to train for vanity. And I just agree with all those. So I'll skim through that. The main thing I want to look at is kind of the front end piece of what training for vanity is. And then the last piece where he talks about the positives of training for vanity. And I want to present my thoughts on what he's going through here. So the intro of the video is just him talking about what he's going to be talking about, which is it a good idea to have vanity as your goal, training for what you look like. This first section, he's going to define training for vanity. And I love Dr. Mike for doing so. Like, what does it mean to be training for vanity? If you don't define stuff, it's impossible to have any sort of coherent conversation about what you're actually arguing or thinking about. So he's defining it for us, and he actually goes over two definitions.
Training for vanity means one of two things for me. One, it's maybe you don't love how you look right now, and you're training to try to look better, and you don't like how you look. There's another form of training for vanity, which is you like how you look, but you think you could look even better.
So those two things are very similar, but the core behind them is slightly different. Both are placing value on appearance, but one is coming from a place of, I like how I look. I just want to continue to work on that. But he says it in a way that's like, I think I could look better. I don't think I could look better as a healthy mindset. I think if you're thinking that you could look better, then something about you is not good, right? It's not okay. Like, you're thinking to yourself, I don't look how I want to look. Because if you looked how you want to look, you'd be done. You wouldn't need to focus on the looks anymore. You could focus on other things. I think I could look better is just to me, it's a thinly veiled, like, I still don't like parts of me. And I do think that it's possible to love yourself but want more for yourself. But I don't know if that's like, I think I could look better. It, to me, doesn't sit in my head as a particularly positive mindset. The front end is better, though. I mean, if you're going to choose one or the other, hey, I love how I look, but I think I could look better, or I hate how I look and I think I could look better. Like, the front end of I love how I look, that's a better mindset to have straight up. So I do agree with that, but I still would argue that I think I could look better is putting an emphasis on looks being important, and you're not there yet somehow. So I guess I guess the argument would be then, are looks important? And he gets into something down the road. They are important in the world. People treat you differently when you look differently. More importantly, though, like, you feel differently about yourself, and you carry yourself differently when you feel better about yourself. But there is an end state to that to some degree. Like, you should get to a place where you're just comfortable in your own skin. And in my perception of it, once you get there, you should stop pursuing trying to look a different way and start pursuing the other benefits of training, which he'll go into in a little bit. So
imagine talking to someone who considers himself incredibly ugly, putting on cakes and layers of makeup. You could, if you had a proclivity to say awkward things to people, be like, hey, are you putting on makeup because you think you're ugly? And if they were very prone to taking criticism well and very introspective, they could be like, honestly, you know what? Yes, I do not love how I look, and I put on contouring makeup to look like someone else, to look like someone that I feel confident presenting to the world.
Right. So the scenario he just gave is somebody who is honest. This likely wouldn't happen, but he prefaced it that way of like, he's just trying to give an example of, rather than just the looking a different way using the makeup, working out or training for vanity. It's using some sort of external thing to make yourself look different, to hopefully feel better about yourself or to look better. I don't like how I look. I'm going to look this way.
You could catch a supermodel in her dressing room. Well, Scott, I got to rephrase that, don't I? I'm not catching her literally. You just happen to be there, a visitor. She's like, you can come in while I put on my makeup. And while she's putting on her makeup, you're like, so you're putting on makeup because you think you look terrible and you don't want to face the world without makeup? But she'd probably laugh and be like, no, I think I look pretty goddamn good without makeup, maybe some of the best in the world. But with makeup, I look like a little bit more of how I want to look.
So, but like, let's think about that. So his two examples are somebody who is less attractive, who thinks they're less attractive, cakes on a bunch of makeup, and it's, is openly willing to admit it's because I don't love myself, and I want to look different. And then someone who is a supermodel, one of the best in the world, one of the most attractive in the world, and without makeup, but somehow still feels the need to add something else to look how they want to look. My argument would be that the vanity portion of that is a failure of our current paradigm around appearance. Like, if the best in the, like, this person who is one of the most attractive people in the world feels like they need to do something more to change their appearance, because the only reason you'd want to change your appearance is because you're not fully appreciating your current appearance. I mean, unless you're like, well, I want to look like a pumpkin today, and you want to look totally different. It's just to me, it's a fundamentally flawed mindset around importance. Like, yes, I understand the reality of the world that we're in is placing importance on the way we look. But if a supermodel, like, listen to the words he's saying, a supermodel who looks more gorgeous than 99% of the world without makeup feels the need to put on makeup, what have we done? Where are we at? Is that bad? I think so. But maybe that's where I'm going wrong in all this.
Accentuated look, and so I'm not putting it to hide. I have great self-esteem and high look.
I have great self-esteem and high.
Both of those.
See, I think there's many supermodels who will tell you, I mean, you can see it on their Instagrams and stuff, that they don't have great self-esteem. They still feel bad about themselves because there's something else either missing or they haven't come to terms with with who they are. And he'll go into that in the video too.
But one comes from a place of something's quite missing, and the other comes from a place of abundance. But yes, abundance is cool, but more abundance is cooler.
So abundance is cool, but more abundance is cooler. That's like saying somebody who gets super rich would be happier if they made even more money. And that's not true. It's just fundamentally flawed. Like, it's once you get enough money to live the lifestyle that you want to live, like, the continued accumulation of wealth is purely there to accumulate the wealth. You may have the ability to, like, do generational things, but many of those people are profoundly unhappy because they lose the meaning of why they had the money in the first place, which was to live the life that they want to live. So it's a continued pursuit, and it's a hollow one. Oh, I've got abundance. More abundance is better. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Anyway, so this is essentially where I think we disagree, and we're allowed. I mean, human beings are allowed to disagree, and I don't think he provides much evidence to support his continued idea here. It's one of the least evidence-based videos that he's done. It feels more like his opinion, which is 100% you're allowed to put out on the internet. So he goes in.
Either way, you end up training because you want to look better. And training because you want to look better just for the look. Like Will Smith and cigars, that dates me. I'm sure that reference. If you want to look better and that's your number one reason for training, technically speaking, you are training for vanity. Now,
Okay, so now he goes into these other reasons for training. And the other reasons for training are all the reasons that I think people should pursue training. Because here's the big, not catch-22, here's the big kind of like pull the veil up sort of deal. When you train for the other reasons of training, vanity follows. The physique you want will follow the other things. Now, where this does not happen is if we also don't address food, if we don't address how we eat. But you would be addressing that if you were training for vanity anyway. So if you switch your mindset and train for these other things, the other benefits of training, and learn to love what your body's capable of, then the form will follow that. Where that also doesn't really work is if you've got this vision in your head of, I want to be Brad Pitt from Fight Club, and you're 5'1", 100 pounds. You're not going to be Brad Pitt from Fight Club. You can be the best, fittest version of yourself. You could maybe even pack on, 30, 40 pounds of muscle if you really spent the time doing so, but it's going to be an immense amount of work, but you're never going to be as tall as Mr. Pitt, and you likely won't have the same facial features that he does. So when you're trying to be someone else, that's rough. But if you're just trying to be the most capable and sexiest version of yourself, pursuing training for health, all of these other things, health, strength, fitness for life, fitness for sport, injury risk reduction, when you train for those, the vanity stuff gets taken care of. And why I think that this is an important thing to note is because when you train for vanity, this stuff might not get taken care of. It's one of the failings of the downsides for training for vanity. You can do it in such a way that it becomes wholly unhealthy. I mean, you can train for these things in ways that it's unhealthy too, but not nearly the same physiological unhealth. A lot of people who enter the world of bodybuilding and figure competition and all this stuff, they do things like starve themselves or go super dehydrate themselves or get really fixated on physique, essentially. And they go through body dysmorphia and all these other pieces because the focus is that. The focus is the attention on the body. So it's really easy to take training for vanity and make it unhealthy. It's harder, in my experience and what I've witnessed, to take training for health and make it unhealthy. Because by design, you'd be going against those other things. Now, that being said, you could take training for, say, fitness or fitness for sport or strength, and you could make those things unhealthy. You could just hurt your body in the process. Like training for strength, there's this thing that, mass moves mass. So you could just overeat constantly and get enormous and do 5 lifts and always be, great world class of those 5 lifts, but a profoundly sick individual when it came to metabolic health or cardiorespiratory endurance or any of these other pieces, which is why I think there is the capacity to make those other ones unhealthy. But it's harder, in my opinion, and less frequent than the people who train for vanity getting more unhealthy more often. Anyway, so he goes over all those, and now he goes into the downsides for training with vanity, with training for vanity.
Can be some of the downsides.
And he goes in these pretty in-depthly. I don't need to go into all of them just because I agree with all of them and I don't need to unpack any of them. But he essentially says, You can get obsessed with it. It takes up more time in your life, basically. And you can do this with any kind of training where you get obsessed with it and it detracts from the rest of your life and doesn't allow you to live the life that you want to live. But that if you train so that you can live a better life, then it doesn't happen as often, because then the reason you're training is to live the better life, and you won't get wrapped up in training quite the same way. So you just don't do it as much. But with training for vanity, when that's the only goal, you can neglect life in order to actually just train. He says it seeps into lifestyle, it stresses you out, things like that. Let's see what else he says. It goes through. It ends up becoming negative. You're no longer running towards a great physique. You're running away from how you were looking before. And the problem with that is there's no end state. You're never like there. You start to get a really negative mindset around it, and you start comparing yourself to everyone in their physiques. And like you're comparing, even though you have a great physique and better than it's ever been, you're comparing it to something that is not you. So you end up being profoundly unhappy. So it becomes a negative thing, and he gives a bunch of reasons as why. Again, I agree with all of these. You attach too much of yourself, your identity to it, and then it comes off as vain. Yep, if you're feeling your look, or if you come off as sad, if you're not, you start using serious enhancements, so it can be unhealthy based off of the ways that you get to this vain place. And it's a bottomless pit of where you go with those, and it's a race with no finish line or no fans. It's just a complete obsession with self. And I would say that is one of the things for me that training with vanity, or training for vanity, really is. It's extremely narcissistic, because like by design there's such a focus on self, and it's not a focus on self and capability and like, hey, how can I be of use to the world? It's literally, how can I look better so when people look at me, they see me as a certain thing, which, if it isn't in a nutshell exactly like narcissism, I don't know. Well, there's other, narcissism is a bigger definition, but I think that encapsulates a lot of narcissism. Is like, I'm going to do things for myself so I'm perceived a certain way because I am awesome and it's all about me. And I think we're all a little bit like that, but at the same time, training for vanity, I think, breeds that to an extreme degree. So then he goes essentially, I added on there also, training for vanity can be extremely unhealthy and you can do that poorly, but he had that in there. So he covers a lot of things that are the negative sides for it. Now he goes into these positive sides, and this is what I really wanted to unpack a little bit, because I think it's interesting what he does here, because the positives he lists are positives of training for vanity, but I would argue that every single one can be achieved through not training for vanity. So every single one can be achieved through training through other means completely. So we want to go in and examine and unpack all of those pieces.
The way, what are the upsides of training for vanity? What? There are upsides? Yeah, there sure shit are. There's a good reason why a lot of people train for vanity, and the vast majority of them both have a good experience of it and have really no complaints about it whatsoever.
So I would argue that, though, because what he's saying is that the upsides, there's a bunch of reasons that we do it. There are upsides, but all of the upsides can be achieved by training for health and for performance and all these other pieces. They just happen to happen when some people train for vanity, because they go from not training to training. And that is one of the main things. And it's actually the one really valid comment that I would say that he makes as a positive for training for vanity, is it starts your journey on training. But the sooner you shift away from it, the likelier you're going to be healthy for the long run, in my personal experience when people are training for it.
About a few reasons. I think you can count at least 4. First,
I also want to point out there's 4. He lists 4. This is his entire life. He's a smart man. And 4 is way less than the ones that he listed, and how he spoke about them for the downsides. So they're already outweighed by the downsides of training for vanity.
Liking how you look in your own body, in your own skin, is not a birthright for all.
Liking how you look is not a birthright for all. So what he goes into here and he talks about is that not everyone's born in the body that other people look at and go, love that. His argument is that if you have been born into a body that you didn't have to work for, then you shouldn't be able to criticize somebody who has had to work for it or why they're working for it, which I think is purely an emotional response and not actually valid. It's a bad argument. It's just emotional, and it's the first time I've ever seen him argue like this. But let's watch it.
Really believe in such a concept, but damn, it's close. Damn, it's close. And to be facetious for comedic purposes, but there is a grain of truth here I'd like for you to try to absorb. Why do people who were born very attractive with awesome bodies, you guys do like 15-year-old kid in your freshman class that fucking abs for no reason, or Jessica, that stupid bitch that had the perfect body from age whatever the fuck, and she was always popular, and she went to college and he was popular, and she was 27 years old and had 2 kids, and then she's 29 years old and she decided to just turn pro in bikini for shits and giggles after 6 months of training. You've been at this for forever. So these folks that were born attractive or born destined for attractiveness, do they even get a say in, is a vanity cool to train for the...
Again, the argument is, do they get a say because they didn't have to train for it?
Those of us who have imperfect physiques and want to improve, it's like, shut up. You know, I'm trying to get mine. You were born into this shit. You always liked your body. Everyone always liked your body. Why can't I get in the gym and train for some fucking vanity? You were born with vanity. Can you imagine people who were born into wealth, like, you know, rich parents, rich grandparents, you know, investment funds you can't even, like, you don't have the authority as a kid or even as an adult to demolish. Like every year you just get crapped out $200K. You just like, that's what you get every year to live your life, or it even deposits weekly into your account, you know, true generational wealth that has been well invested. You imagine one of those folks who gets $200K a year just to exist the rest of life, looking at someone who's like working really hard and trying to build a company for themselves so they can get some money for them and their families and be like, geez, like that person's really money driven. What the?
So that's not a good analogy. I mean, it's a fine analogy to describe what's happening here, but those two things, while would it be cold and insensitive and kind of hypocritical for somebody who has been given wealth to point to somebody who works really hard and say that person's very money driven? Sure, it'd be cold, but it wouldn't mean it wasn't true. I know plenty of people who are very money driven, and they do that at the expense of their families. And if someone had a bunch of money and said that person's money driven, and someone who doesn't have a ton of money, like myself, and I've always had to work for what I have, and I say he's pretty money driven, both of those statements are true. Just because this person has the money and I maybe don't, doesn't make my saying it any less true. So this analogy, while making sense emotionally, like how dare you say it, isn't providing any value when it comes to why training for vanity is good. It's just emotionally saying, I don't like being told what I can or shouldn't do by people who haven't had to work like I've had to work, which is just emotional. It's not, there's no science or data backing this. I mean, for clarity's sake, I've been a tiny male my entire life. Like I've never had like a body that people were like, oh yeah, that guy. I'm like a 5'7", 130-pound dude all through high school and all that stuff. So while I wasn't really overweight or anything, I wasn't the guy, and I had to work for anything that I've ever had. So I feel like I can comment here, even in his world of saying you have to work for stuff.
Fuck, you better shut your mouth. Are you crazy? Why don't you give up your trust fund and then talk about... It's not a birthright for all of us to look good in our bodies and feel good in our bodies, but damn, it's close. And I don't care what attractive people think about it. I care what the rest of us... You see with this face I'm dealing with? Kindergartners cry at the very sight of my face, as well they should. Um, there's something to it, man.
But he doesn't care what anyone thinks about it. He doesn't care what even the people who have had to work for it. He'll mention it here in a second.
I'm trying to get the body I like, and don't you dare stop me. And that is a good reason. And if you don't think it's a good reason, if you have a not cool body, I respect your Buddhistic integrity and your ability to just be cool with whatever.
I respect your thing, whatever, but I disagree with you, is what he's saying here. He's saying, I don't care that you think that, even though you've come from this place.
If you have a good body, I don't want to hear your opinion.
So if you do have a good body, though, I'm not even going to listen to your opinion because of who you are, which is very close-minded. And it's the most close-minded thing that I think I've ever heard him say. So this must be a very emotional topic for him and touch pretty close to home. And it has to be, because the app he's created and the style of training that he does is purely for aesthetic means. He trains 100% aesthetically. So if for some reason he didn't believe in training for vanity, then he would be selling something he didn't believe in. And he's a smart, well-intentioned dude. So I don't think that would ever be the case. So there's got to be inside a justification for selling a program like this and promoting this kind of stuff and doing the things that he does. But I would say it's a lot deeper than what he's he's actually presenting the depth of it here.
About it because you are like a rich person telling poor, hardworking people to stop working hard because they're obsessed with money. You already got that shit. Next, vanity has a huge upside because when you love the process of training and you realize the process of training enhances your look and you love your look more and more and more, you can easily get this vanity as the trigger to get you to fall in love with the training process for its own accord.
Right. So this is the main point that I think I agree with, that I think we need to say is one of the best parts about training for vanity, is that it gets you to fall in love with the idea of training. But it's a start. It's a big start. And if it just worked that way, like, oh, you start training and then you just look really good all of a sudden, which is not the case. If anyone who's ever started training, that's why people don't just keep training. It's like, it doesn't just work right away. It takes time. It can be a disservice and a service all in one. If you start to have success, you'll want to continue that success. It'll also get you to start, which is, it's very hard to get people to start. But we as humans are so visually fixated that if we go, okay, I really want to look like this, we can go, I will put myself in discomfort. Like, I will go out of my way to do these things. And I would say that this is great. It makes you adhere to and stick to a program. It makes you start a program more importantly than anything else. And he says it gives you guaranteed health, strength, and injury performance. That's not true. If you're training correctly, it does. And it will give you something it'll give you some health benefits no matter what training that you're doing, but some of them not so much. And if you're pursuing vanity, a lot of vanity requires eating better, and eating better can be done eating better, or it can be eating not much. And a lot of the spaces that are prone to performance, when we're talking about visual performance, not athletic performance, do things like dehydrate yourself, take mad supplements, go into crazy dietary caloric restriction. Like they take it to extremes and can very easily be extremely unhealthy. So it doesn't give you guaranteed health, but it's there. So this, I think, is valid. Like what he's talking about here. This is the biggest plus of training for vanity, is that it gets you started. But you need to shift out of it pretty quick.
And it makes adherence and consistency essentially non-issues. And thus, because you're in the gym for vanity, let's say you're a 45-year-old dad of 3.
Yeah, so he just basically is like, you get in the gym for vanity, you build this habit, you start doing the stuff, you see the successes, you keep going. Yeah, it's great.
Do good health behaviors.
So you get better health behaviors, this is great. But all of the things that are mentioned here can be done for training, not for vanity. Like nothing this is unique to the training for vanity, other than the fact that it's easier to start if you go, I want to look different. And sometimes it's really motivating in the moment to just get through the doors and go. But the sooner once you're in there, you shift your mindset from like, I need to look a certain way to I need to feel a certain way, or I need to perform a certain way, or I want to lift a certain thing, or do a certain move. The sooner you shift to that, those successes actually happen faster and more often than looking the way you want to look. And they have very natural end states. I want to lift 300 pounds. Boom, you lift 300 pounds. What it takes to lift 300 pounds means a lot of other things. And you put a lot of other work in. And once you get there, you're like, whoa, 300 pounds I was hit. Now I can either shift my goal to another metric of performance, or I can push this weight. I want to lift 400 pounds. Now, of course, can you do this unhealthily? Absolutely. But can you also, if you had a good coach, shift it to something that was more healthy? Like, okay, I want to lift 300 pounds, but I also want to have a 6-minute mile. What does that look like? So I want to have both of these. How do I train to do that? Those types of goals that are, on other ends of the spectrum, there are far more of them in the performance space than I want to have thick delts. It's like, fucking cool. Why? Just vanity. And what is a sick delt? What's the metric there? Does it need to be 3 inches by 5 inches? Well, what the fuck? Anyway, my bias came out. Sorry.
I would say this is a big upside. And lastly, and this is probably one of the biggest upsides of training for vanity, is it can really heal your soul.
So it can heal your soul. So this is important because I think this speaks to really what he got from training.
I mean by that, for those of us who had issues with our bodies and our self-efficacy and self-esteem based on how we looked, or who have them still currently, these issues can be healed by looking better because they're caused by looking worse. And if you stay objective and stay positive.
No, they are not caused by looking worse. They're caused by how you feel about how you look. It's not the looking worse. It's the how you feel about how you look. You could look better and feel the same way, like many people who look attractive do. So the root cause is not the look. Now, are there people who by changing the look will change the way that they feel? Yes. But I would even argue that more people get value from the effort put into attempting to work on themselves than the actual outcome of what their physiology changes and looks like. That's my opinion, of course.
The better you look, the better you feel. And that can eliminate some pretty deep scars. Not right away. It can take months and it can take years. But if you spend years looking way better than your older self and improving that whole time, it can heal deep wounds that aren't like, PTSD style wounds, but nonetheless nuisances. Like if your last experience with physique was when you were 13 and took your shirt off after gym class in the locker room and everyone laughed at you because you had titties and you were a dude. Not going to say that wasn't me, but it was like half of us, right? If that's your experience, getting into really good shape in your late 20s and being the person at the beach with abs and everyone asking you how the hell you look like this, that happens a few times, a few dozen times to you. You go on trips, you go on vacation.
All of what he's mentioning can be done while pursuing the other stuff, not the vanity. And your mindset will be shifting by pursuing the other stuff. And the how you feel about yourself, because people will start to mention how you look because that's how people see it. They don't see what you're capable of. They start to see how you look. So you'll be pursuing the other stuff. They'll start mentioning how you look. And all of a sudden you're getting validation from all sides. This is the bomb. That to me is far more healthy and a longer standing fix to your issues than the pursuit of vanity. Because like he stated, it's never ending. Once you get to a place, you're running a race with no finish line if it's just the vanity. Because you never stop potentially changing your body. And at some point, that body's going to grade.
You go blah, blah, blah. And everywhere people are talking about you and your body, how amazing it is. Because if you have a good physique, people just bring it up. Especially if you're shirtless on a picnic with friends. They're like, dude, what the hell? How many abs do you have? Hearing enough of that good stuff, being the center of attention in a good way versus bad way, it really fills your psyche with way more positive than negative. And then you can look back at that seventh grade or eighth grade experience that wasn't so great for you. And really, as a kid, you could get pretty hurt by people saying unkind things about your body. It used to hurt you, and it kind of was a sore spot, at least in your memory for a while. But now people are like, you have any issues with your body? Any bad memories? And you're like, no. I guess back in seventh grade, I felt weird about it, but like, I don't know, 5 years of having sculpted abs and chiseled shoulders, I kind of soaked up the attention and my own love for myself in the mirror and the sun so much. I kind of just feel like I naturally look great and I love my body.
I would agree with
That's
that.
really how I feel about it.
I would agree with that.
You know,
But
it's
again,
real tough.
I don't think you need to train for vanity to have those accomplishments. All of those accomplishments can be done through training for health and sport performance and capability and all of these other pieces, and let vanity be something that follows that.
To go from your last memory as people making fun of you for your physique and you agreeing with them that you didn't like your physique, to like healing that inner child bullshit without actually becoming someone who has a physique that you now approve of. It's much easier if you become the thing. It's like if you were a victim of violence at some point in your life, getting over that is possible without becoming capable yourself. But if you eventually become like a super martial artist or a SWAT team officer, that's a pretty good way to heal from feeling like a victim, because you haven't felt like a victim in a real long time, and making a victim out of you is a really uphill battle. So no, you don't have to become a SWAT team officer if you got bullied when you were younger, but I'll tell you this, being on a SWAT team for 10 years sure shit heals a lot of bullying that it would be much more difficult to heal by.
I mean, it doesn't heal it. It just, it allows you to have evidence against it.
That's all. So if you grew up in a way that you didn't have the body you wanted and it really hurt you in a certain way, those scars can be deep and lasting. And making sure that you look great and really having a positive journey through that can really heal a bunch of them. I know it did for me, and I know it does for a lot of other real people. So to wrap this up.
But I don't know. So like, I'd argue the way he talks about this through some of these pieces, it sounds like it's still relatively relevant for him. I don't know.
Should you train?
It's definitely healed relative to when he was a kid, which is cool.
Absolutely. Other reasons like strength and health are totally cool too, but vanity's awesome.
He just presented many points against vanity and only a couple points for vanity, all of which can be done through not training for vanity. And he's saying it's awesome. And that's a hard one for me to stomach. Is vanity fine to train for? Sure. But I don't think it's nearly as valuable as not training for vanity. And it's like, you can do anything. And I think you can even listen to all of the videos he talks on here. It's like, you can do all these exercises. You can do all this stuff. It's like, it's a sliding scale from more effective to less effective. So you can do anything, and something is better than nothing, but there are definitely things that are better than other things for achieving the outcomes that we're looking for. And when you talk about the outcomes that he's talking about here, like, you know, feeling better about yourself and walking through the world more capable and holding your head higher and healing the wounds inside, all of these things can be trained while getting many other positive side effects, much like the exercises he talks about. Like when you do certain exercises, he talks about like a, you know, cable jack-off machine being one like that is less effective than like a skull crusher, and you're splitting hairs, so why not just do the skull crusher? Like, because it's offering more for us, and you can't tell me why this one's better than the other one. It's just, I don't know, it seems to go against his own general philosophy.
Your relationship with your training, your relationship with your body, and your relationship with your psyche healthy and sustainable over the long term. If it's positive and healthy and it's sustainable, vanity's fucking dope. If it's negative, you deal with the negative. Vanity by itself isn't bad. There's just bad versions of it. Anyway.
Okay, so vanity by itself isn't bad, but there's bad versions of it. You could say that about almost anything. It'd be like, cocaine isn't bad in itself. It's just you take too much of it. You know, alcohol, of course, isn't bad by itself, but, you know, it kills so many people per year and people abuse the daylights out of it. And the truth is, like, you can use anything as a tool in moderation. And those of us who've got good control over ourselves and things that are going on, like, we can utilize tools better and more effective and get more from them. But there's more dangerous tools and less dangerous tools, you know? There's tools that offer more total bonuses. Like, take coffee. Coffee's a tool. It allows you to do more work. And its positives for most people often outweigh the negatives. It allows you to be more alert, allows you to have a ritual, it allows you to set your mind. And are there people who could use coffee poorly and it is maybe damaging them? Sure. And then they shouldn't use coffee. But on average, coffee actually helps most people. Alcohol, on the other hand, I would say for most people is more damaging. A lot of people use it and don't feel damaged by it, but there's not many people that it helps as a tool. But to say that, yeah, we should all just kind of probably alcohol's dope, use it, is like, well, that's a pretty mixed statement. Like, there's many, many, many people who you say that to, they're gonna be like, great, Mike said alcohol is a tool, use it. And it's like, well, for some, maybe not for you. Are there other tools that might be better for you, like journaling or meditation? There's far less negatives that could happen from those two tools, and you get a similar outcome in the long run. They just require a little bit more effort. I don't know. It's an interesting subject. I liked his video. Those are my thoughts on it all. I do think that Dr. Mike here is coming from a place of personal experience, and his entire business is centered around training for vanity. So you can't assume that he would be like, it's bad. And it does have its positive, and it can be done healthy. But I would not say that on average I see people who train for vanity having long-term success and feeling great about themselves. Whereas people who train for health and wellness and more than anything capability, what they're able to do, they tend to see more long-term success because there's so many avenues that you can continue to see growth in there. Anywho, that's my thoughts. What do you guys all think?